Well, hello there, folks. So welcome to another video, and this time it's going to be another movie review. That's going to be me doing the Naked Gun trilogy, and I have this on Blu-ray. I got this sometime last year, just under 15 bucks. And the first film is definitely going to be the Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. And the film is definitely part of my childhood. I still enjoy it to this day, and getting to the crew and the cast, it was directed by David Zucker, produced by Robert K. Weiss, written by the Zucker brothers, Jerry and David, Jim Abrams, and Pat Proft. And it was basically based on the Police Squad TV series that came out in '82, which only produced about 6 episodes from what I read. I believe a lot of people liked it, but it was canceled for ridiculous reasons, for some stupid excuse. I don't know that much about the history about it. I do know that it's on DVD, but I have yet to see the TV series of it. But I'm sure it's funny either way, because Leslie Nielsen was in that series. He's pretty much the only one to reprise his roles. I believe different actors played their respective roles in the film versus the TV series. So yeah. And you also, of course, Leslie Nielsen's back as Frank Drebin. The cast this time we have is Priscilla Presley, who is probably better known for being married to Elvis Presley. I don't know how extensive of an actress she was, but this is probably what she was well known for, being Frank Drebin's love interest in these movies. But anywho, you also have Ricardo Montalbán, who is better known as playing Khan, last seen in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I think this is his major film role since that film. And sadly, he's no longer with us. Both Nielsen and Montalbán, I don't know if Kennedy is still alive. Let me see if he's alive. I don't know. Nope, he actually died 3 years ago. So rest in peace to George Kennedy. But anywho, back in the cast, you have, believe it or not, have O.J. Simpson as Detective Norberg. He was a known Buffalo Bills football player in a very highly, controversial murder case back in '94, actually. And that was the same year that the third Naked Gun film came out, which eventually I'll review sooner or later. But anyways, you will also have Nancy Marchand as Mayor Barkley, Ray Burke as Pap Schmear, Jeanette Charles as Queen Elizabeth II. You also have a cameo by Weird Al Yankovic. He would also have a cameo, I believe, in the third film. He wasn't in the second one. And you also have a cameo by one of the Major League Baseball players. You also have some of the cameos by the umpires and the professional announcers as well. And John Houseman appears as a driving teacher, which I'll eventually mention that scene at some point. And the film was released in December 2nd, '88, day after my birthday, which is interesting, which is cool. And the film's budget was only $12 million, but this was it was a big hit. It was a commercial and critical success, which led to 2 sequels, Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear, and Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult. So, but anyways, getting to the plot here, basically Nielsen plays this police squad lieutenant, Frank Drebin. He's taking a vacation in Beirut, as we would find out it's him. He's able to disrupt this conference of America's greatest enemies. I don't know how to pronounce their names, so I might get them wrong. Like, you have Idi Amin, Muammar Gaddafi, Yasser Arafat, Fidel Castro, I can pronounce, and Mikhail Gobov, I don't know. It's hard to pronounce their names. They're basically trying to find a way to conceive a terrorist plan to pretty much humiliate the U.S. and Los Angeles, and somehow Drebin's able to thwart this. He gets into the fist fights with all of them. He's actually able to defeat them pretty handily. He has this one funny moment though, where I guess it's Mikhail, where he has some kind of a birthmark on the forehead, and Frank grabs a towel and rubs it off, and it comes off, and he's like, "I knew it." And then he gets in a fight with this one guy who where he punches him, and then he tries to do almost like a Three Stooges kind of reference, and punches the guy off to the side, and then eventually he faces him again, where he, I think he headbutts him, and then apparently his shirt, I don't know how you pronounce that, is the clothing his sharib or whatever you want to call it comes off, and it's revealed to be a mohawk, and then Frank's like, huh? And just kicks him in the balls. And right before he leaves, one of the guys asks him, who are you? And he's like, I'm Lieutenant Frank Drebin. And then when he opens the doors, he's like, and don't you ever let me catch you in America. When he's about to go out, the doors close on him, and he falls down, and that's when you see that the famous intro opening sequence with the police light, where it goes anywhere, like it's on the highway, then it goes anywhere, like it goes in the girl's bathroom, or like inside of a restaurant, or just anywhere pretty much. Just pretty much setting the tone of this crime comedy parody that you have here. And I really enjoyed it this day. It's still entertaining. It's definitely part of my childhood, because Leslie Nielsen was definitely part of my funny bone growing up. He's been in films like this, and he did Airplane. Maybe that'll be the next thing I'll do, is Airplane. I do have that on DVD and on Blu-ray, I believe. Not the sequel, though, but I like the sequel. But anyways, he's in those films. I think this is probably what he was best known for, doing the Naked Gun films. And throughout the 90s, he's been in some other stuff. It seems like The Naked Gun was probably his most well-known work. I know he did Spy Hard and Wrongfully Accused, which I find to be very underrated, but those did not do as well as these films did. He wasn't in one film called Superhero, I believe, which actually had Kevin Hart in there. And I have to admit he wasn't, but that's for another review. I'm just going to focus on this. Basically, Norberg, O.J. Simpson's character, believe it or not, he tries to thwart this heroin drug operation that's basically organized by the dock's owner, Vincent Ludwig, which is Ricardo Montalbán's character. He basically tries to, kick in the door, Norberg, but he ends up kicking the hole in, and pretty much almost all the henchmen notice it and actually get ready to arm themselves. And then Norberg gets in and tries to order everyone to, like, drop their guns. Almost everyone doesn't do it except for one. They all give him a dirty fucking look, and then then the door opens, and out of the shadows, Vincent Ludwig steps in and orders his henchmen to kill him, and they all shoot at him. It's hitting him, but it's not killing him, surprisingly enough. But unfortunately, what starts to hurt him is whenever he puts his hand on something hot, I think, and then he somehow gets shoved into some wet paint, and then when he goes under towards a window, the door closes on his hand, and then eventually somehow he gets thrown out of the door and into the water somehow. But eventually he's able to be rescued, and of course he's taken to a hospital. And then when Frank Drebin returns to L.A., after his vacation and terrorists and thwarting the terrorists pretty much, it turns out he has lost someone that one of his Frank's lover pretty much leaves him, and he is apparently his lover left him for some gym trainer or something like that, and he apparently feels like when he approaches the microphone where you would give a speech and all that. He tries to think that, you're here to get a story, but apparently they're all there to see Weird Al Yankovic, and that's pretty much his cameo. He's actually in the film, so that's kind of cool. And then when they get in the car, somehow, when they back the car into the airport where they would transfer your belongings, somehow it sticks to 3 of them, and they're driving it on the road, and you see things that resemble tits or something like that, and they're having this discussion about Norberg and and Frank's life, personal life, really, in general. And even when they stop by the hospital, it's the carts or whatever are attached to them still, which is hilarious. And then, of course, he visits Norberg, and Norberg somehow is able, in a day, to provide, some cryptic clues about, I love you, which is actually a boat, and some other things that involve, Norberg's attempt at busting the heroin deal and whatnot. And eventually Frank meets with a police scientist who has invented a cufflink that's on your part of the suit and can shoot tranquilizer darts. And apparently he also learns that the scientist Ted is able to determine that Nord's jacket tested positive for heroin. And eventually Frank is tasked with another assignment, be by being put in charge of the security for the visit of Queen Elizabeth II. And he also has 24 hours to pretty much clear Norberg before word gets out to what happened and detracts the Queen's visit. And I'll get to the funny moment during that part where where Frank is grateful for the Queen's visit and then says some unbelievable stuff and whatnot. And when Frank decides he's going to make a visit to Ludwig, you know, someone made a comment on something on my last video, but anyways, trying to get into the focus of this review. They basically talk about Ludwig, and of course, not Ludwig, but they talk about Norberg and whatnot, and Ludwig learns that Norberg's still alive, and Ludwig is able to introduce his assistant Jane Spencer, Priscilla Presley's character, and then, you know, and she begins to assist Frank, and then of course Ludwig, you know, insists that Jane get to know Frank a little bit more and, you know, have that dinner with him, and they eventually begin to fall for another. But Jane is unaware of Ludwig's illegal activities, not just heroin, but apparently during this one scene, Ludwig meets with Pashmir, who we saw earlier in that conference in Beirut. They attempt to discuss an assassination plot against the Queen, and Ludwig agrees to do it for 20 million, but Pashmir needs some kind of convincing of how he's going to pull the plan off. Ludwig reveals and explains that he plans on using this beeper, which could be like a bit of a necklace that's attached on the arm of somebody. Like, for example, somehow he's able to attach the necklace or whatever it was on one of his secretaries named Dominique, and he uses this beeper to create this post-hypnotic suggestion, which just completely changes their behavior and demeanor. Like, she pulls a gun on Pashmir, and she says, "I must kill Pashmir," and the gun is actually empty, of course. She starts shooting, the clicks. She actually starts to put the gun towards a temple and starts to actually see if it was really empty, and it is. Then when Ludwig turns the beeper off, she resumes back to her normal status and says, "Would that be cream and sugar with that?" And so Pashmir is convinced, and actually apparently Norberg somehow got it on this. No, sorry, did I say? No, anyways, Ludwig attempts to unsuccessfully, you know, use one of the doctors at the hospital by using this post-hypnotic suggestion. It was activated by one of his henchmen, and he tries to suffocate Norberg with a pillow, but somehow Frank is able to intervene, and ends up, you know, going on this chase throughout. Whether it's he actually ends up getting into the car of a student driver and follows him, and the hypnotized doctor ends up dying pretty much because he goes from being he ends up being on a ballistic missile and ends up I believe he runs into somehow the army truck and runs into and ends up being on the missile, and it runs into a fucking fireworks store and it ends up blowing up, and, you know, and basically there's no motive for that, and eventually, you know, Frank's still suspecting something about Ludwig, and, you know, he breaks into his office searching for evidence. He actually finds a note from Pashmir, which pretty much confirms Frank's suspicions, but he inadvertently, when he tries to read it and uses a lighter, he inadvertently starts a fire, and it destroys pretty much the note in the office, and he tries to escape. He does escape the office, but apparently he ends up assaulting a lady because he grabs her breast while he was outside. Then he has to hang on to dear life because he's outside the window and actually grabs one of the stone dicks or something like that. And then he ends up back in that same person's home and still holding the dildo, and of course he is, you know, definitely on suspension for that. And as a result, I mean, Frank has another, eventually has another run-in with one of Ludwig's men at the factory in the stockyard, and tries to, he's actually shooting at Frank, but actually doesn't hit him. Frank even says, "Hey, I can't hear you, you have to speak a little louder," or something like that. But eventually they end up chasing each other inside I think a toxic waste factory, and the guy runs out of ammo, tries to punch at Frank, but actually Frank dodges it, and he falls into like this pit of toxic waste or something like that. And he definitely knows that Ludwig is up to no good, and tries to confront him at this at the reception for the Queen's arrival. And apparently Jane is also there, and he tries to convince Jane that Ludwig is no good and is, you know, planning an assassination attempt on the Queen. Jane disbelieves her, and eventually he decides to end things with her, apparently. And Frank misinterprets Ludwig's presentation of the musket, where he thinks he's trying to kill her, but he actually you know, tries to save her and ends up on top of her, but he ends up causing more trouble. Apparently he was just giving her a warm welcome, I guess. And as a result, he's fired from police squad. But eventually Jane does overhears what Ludwig was telling to one of his men, that Ludwig plans to execute the Queen at the baseball game between the Seattle Mariners and the California Angels at the Anaheim Stadium during the 7th inning. That will during the, I believe something about the third I can't remember, it's been a while. And basically one of the players will perform the act unbeknownst to them. And another one just made another comment, so that's kind of cool. I'll get to them eventually. I'll give them some love. Anyways, back on the subject. And Frank is fired. He tries to go undercover. He actually tries to disguise himself as a Rico. And he just commented again. Thank you, Thomas. Anywho. Anyways, he tries to disguise himself as a singer. And eventually, you know, they do know it's Frank. And he tries to, you know, sing the Star Spangled Banner, but he's not that great at it, and some people are booing him, and Ludwig even orders the cops to try to arrest him, but yeah, he decides to go under disguise as the umpire, and then he's actually doing a better job of that eventually. And then, no matter what, he's actually trying to search all the players by performing body searches on him. Like, there was one funny moment where he performs one body search on this one pitcher, where he removes his hat, and apparently there's like Vaseline in there and stuff like that. And he's doing everything he can to stall time to prevent the Queen from being assassinated. And then when Ludwig starts using patience, and eventually when the 7th inning, you know, stretch begins, Ludwig finally activates his sleeper, Reggie Jackson, and Jane attempts to alert Frank, who chases after Jackson and tackles him, but apparently by tackling him, all the other players from the Angels start to join in and attack them, as well as players from the Mariners start to attack as well. And Jackson almost actually does point the gun at the Queen, but Frank attempts to use one of those tranquilizer darts, but it doesn't hit him, but it actually hits a lady from above, and she falls on top of Jackson. And Ludwig, you know, already upset at that point, you know, holds Jane at gunpoint and attempts to leave the stadium. And Frank, you know, follows Ludwig up to the top of the stadium, and he's actually able to shoot Ludwig with the other cufflink dart, and it hits him this time. And but he falls over the side, and he's struck by a passing bus and run over by a steamroller, and then trampled by the U.S. marching band. And one of the band members inadvertently steps on Ludwig's beeper, triggering actually Jane now in an attempt to kill Frank with Ludwig's gun. But Frank is somehow able to break Jane's hypnotized state by professing his love and feelings towards her, and even giving her engagement ring, and eventually Jane's able to break out of it, and they embrace one another. Frank and Jane, meet Mayor Barkley, who, is definitely proud of what he's done and reinstates Frank back at police squad, and even recovered Norberg, who is recovered from his coma. Congratulations, but however, Frank inadvertently pushes Norberg's chair down the stadium stairs and launches him onto the field. And that's how the film ends. So basically, it's still a fun film to this day. I still enjoy the heck out of this. There's great moments like I mentioned before, Weird Al Yankovic makes a cameo, and he's talking about Frank is saying some unintentional stuff. There's a funny moment where when him and Jane first meet, Jane tries to walk slowly down the stairs and somehow trips on one of the stairs and falls down, but is able to get back up. And then when Frank is giving his kind of third-person narration, the long legs that you'd like to suck on, and Jane is turning around looking at him, and she runs into the side of the door or something like that. And then when they first get together and have dinner, and they become intimate with each other, she says she practices safe sex, and she has somehow, you don't see the nudity, but she somehow takes off her dress, and she's naked, and then somehow Frank just rips his dress out. It's like it just tore away. All his suit and everything just tears away. And then they get inside these oversized Trojan condoms where it just completely covers their body. It's unbelievable, but I like it. And then you see their little nice, romantic interlude where they basically, it's like they're in a music video, and the name of the song's called Something Tells Me I'm Into Something Good, and it's performed by Peter Noon or something like that. And they show a bit of a montage where they're walking on the beach. They're going into a movie, and then when they come out of the movie, they're laughing, and it pans up and it says Platoon on there. So yeah, that's hilarious. And then they're at this hot dog stand, and they're getting hot dogs, and Frank squirts her with, I think, mustard, and I think Jane squirts him with ketchup, and they both squirt the hot dog stand guy with both the ketchup and the mustard, and they just laugh about it. And then right towards the end of the little montage, she says, "Frank, I had a wonderful time, and I feel like I've known you after knowing you one day." And she asks him for a nightcap, and he's like, "No, I don't wear one of those. I'm on duty, but I'll be thinking of you." And then of course he turns around and leaves, and then you see a little an MTV style title card off to the left, which is hilarious. And there's all the funny moments, like in the very beginning, whenever Frank is talking about luck, about Norberg, and Frank, not Frank, but Ed Hawken is talking about, how they're going to find, Norberg's killer or attempted murderer. And then, okay, just another thing popped out from everything Star Wars, so, jeez, everything's popping up. But anyways, back on the subject. Frank's being a little more negative, well, he might turn into a vegetable or something along those lines. I can't remember everything he said, unfortunately, but it was just hilarious. Now let's get a bite to eat. And then, the hilarious moment is whenever, Frank is thrilled and thankful to be, assigned to protecting this security of the Queen. I forget what he says, what was so, unnecessary, but apparently he had a little trouble with his microphone, and he had to wear a different one. And, gosh, I can't remember what it was. I watched this a few days ago, now I forgot. Anyways, he goes into the bathroom, and somehow the sound of him going to the bathroom and him pissing is actually heard almost everywhere, and it's even heard on people watching the TV. And he's just, being himself, just saying whatever he is, just continuously pissing. And just when you think he's done it, he has to, he exhales and has to piss some more. It's just hilarious. But yeah. And what else? Gosh, what else? And when Frank's having to, go undercover and not knowing what the hell to do, he goes undercover as Enrico Palazzi. He somehow pretends he's the usher and knocks out Enrico. And then whenever he's trying to get, change into his clothes, a janitor comes in, and he's like, "Okay, you're good, guys. Just hilarious. And then, of course, whenever he tries to sing, everyone is just booing him, giving him dirty looks, and it's just hilarious. And then when he decides he's going to go undercover as the usher, he encounters him. He's like, "Hey, can you tell me, is this a real bat?" And he just knocks him out. So yeah, he tries to, do his best to, pretend that he's the umpire, and he has to like body search everyone. And like I said earlier, there's this one particular baseball player where Frank had to take off his hat, and there's like Vaseline inside of it. And then he has to always continue to like strip search everyone. And then whenever he tries to like stall the game, he has to throw a whole bunch of balls so that that Ludwig doesn't succeed in his plan. Gosh, what else are the funny moments? Or whenever Frank tries to save the queen, it ends up making it worse because he's on top of her, and they take like a photo of it, and it's plastered everywhere, and that's what gets him fired. And then when Jane visits him before they sort of have their mini breakup, he has some old Chinese food, and Jane's like, "I thought they closed down years ago." And when Frank smells it, he's like in his face. Yeah, gosh, there's so many hilarious moments and so many quotes. And oh yeah, when Frank killed some actors and he thought they were drug dealers, I like how the mayor is like, "Those were professional actors, you moron," or something like that. Yeah, I can't remember any of the quotes, and that sucks. But overall, this is just a fun, great time of a film. It's full with dry pan humor, some unexpected quotes, or whenever, I don't know, some fun moments like apparently whenever Frank gets out of his car, somehow the airbags go off, and then the car somehow starts going into drive, and Frank thinks it's someone else's car and starts shooting at it. And yeah, it still continues to drive, and Frank's telling this police officer, "Hey, I want names and witnesses from everyone," pretty much. Or whenever Frank knocks out Ludwig, and this one person is, "You killed him." He's like, "Nah, he's just stunned. He'll be okay." And then Ludwig just falls over to the side of the stadium, and then of course is, killed whenever by a passing bus, run over by the steamroller, and then of course trampled by the USC marching band. And then Captain Ed Hawkins says, that's how my father went off. And just filled with so many hilarious moments that I can't really think of off the top of my head. But it does have some real great. It has fun lines of dialogue, and just, you're guaranteed to laugh your ass off during this movie. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't. Leslie Nielsen delivers on the deadpan humor and everything. And the love story is kind of believable, and Priscilla Presley does a good job, and Ricardo Montalbán does pretty solid as the villain. I mean, after all, he's the guy that portrayed Khan, for crying out loud. He did a great job, so there's no question about it. Even George Kennedy, he does well as the captain, who's always, always backs Frank up, and no matter what, even if he says something out of line, he's always there. And O.J. Simpson, despite what happened, he does okay for not being in the film as much. He's in it for a little bit, and then the plot kind of is about him to an extent, but you don't really see much of him. You see him here whenever the doctor tries to kill him or suffocate him, and yeah, something like that. And then, oh yeah, I was going to get to the John Houseman guy. The part whenever they're trying to chase the hypnotized doctor, they encounter Stephanie, the student driver, whenever she's trying to chase the doctor down in the car, and she goes down the wrong way, and a truck semi comes up, and just the way that John Houseman's just deadpanly, just nonchalantly, acting like it's some thing. Normally you wouldn't go down a wrong way, but he tells her to apply the brake, back off, and then whenever the truck driver honks at her, he suggests that carefully extend your left arm and then extend your middle finger, and she gives the driver the finger. and he's like, very good. But yeah, those are one of the other hilarious moments. I'm trying to think of others. Like, there's a lot of deadpan humor, but either way you slice it, you're in for a good time. If you have not seen this, give this a watch. I really can't think of any other flaws in this film. Maybe I wish there could have been maybe a bit of a backstory, but overall the prose, it just delivers on its deadpan humor, comedy, you name it. There's actually another moment I forgot. Apparently, whenever Luckwick and Drebin first meet, Luckwick has this type of fish that can be very dangerous. Whenever, apparently, I think it's the pin that gets inside, and Frank tries to get the pin out a few times, and apparently that fish grabs onto his finger, and apparently, eventually, somehow, he's able to grab the pin and just stab the fish, and he eventually places it back in the fucking fish tank. Just another fun little moment right there, so yeah. But yes, overall, definitely a well-rounded classic, and it does have two very good sequels. I don't know which one's the best. I think, honestly, I have to say for right now, I think I like all of them pretty equally. But yeah, I think sometime on Wednesday I'll probably get to maybe do the second one and maybe the third one. And, but yeah, look forward to doing the sequels. They still hold up. This probably would not get made today, you know, because of certain political standards it might have, but this movie was way ahead of its time, and it definitely deserves to be put on the classic for Leslie Nielsen. That's probably what he was well known for. And I think the Blu-ray, and getting to the Blu-ray, I think the picture quality was pretty good. Sadly, the only extras was only on the first one. It just has a commentary by David Zucker, producer Robert Weiss, and a guy named Peter Tilden. I believe there's a trailer, and that's it. The other two, there are no features, unfortunately, so I think the flaw is I wish they would have gotten some better features. But this is Parapricks that we're talking about here. They don't really give a shit about extras, so there you go. Okay, how long have I been recording? Let's see. I think it's time to wrap it up. But anyways, if you haven't seen this film, give it a watch. If you have seen it, you know, definitely get it on Blu-ray. It has great picture quality and good sound quality. Definitely worth it if you ask me. Anywho, stay tuned for my next reviews of Naked Gun 2 and 3, so I'll be soon in a few more videos, folks. Later.